All right, today we're going to take a look at the basic data types in Python. In the previous two videos, I showed you guys how to install Python and how to install the IDE, which is PyCharm, which is what you see here. So you should be at this point now where you have your IDE up and you've got your first little project going. And now before we jump into actually creating any programs, apps, scripts, anything like that, we need to understand the different, at least the basic data types that we'll be working with within Python. This kind of gives us the rules of the road and shows us what we can do and how we do it, right? At a super basic level. We're not going to cover any variables or functions or anything like that today. This is just going to be the data types, which I think is a very good foundational level lesson. So the first one on the list here is an integer. And if you're not familiar, if you're brand new to programming, awesome, glad you're here. These are comments, what you see above here, right? So integer, float, string, Boolean, and none, those are just comments. And to make a single line comment in an IDE for like PyCharm for Python, just start it with a hashtag or an ampersand sign. Not ampersand, a number sign. Okay, so that symbol right there, Shift 3 on most keyboards. Okay, so that is your hashtag, and now you can just make a comment. And that won't run when you run the code. It just ignores any lines that are comments. Okay, so integer is our first data type, and an integer is just a whole number, so any whole number. So 7 is an integer, 10 is an integer, so on and so forth. We can do basic math, we can do complex math, we can do all kinds of math with numbers, and math is very important when it comes to programming. You're going to use this in multiple ways, building different scripts and applications, not only to get values of things like your score, money, whatever you're doing with your application, but also within the application, maybe you need to count things or iterate through things a specific amount of time. So math is obviously very important when it comes to programming. So let's just do a basic example. I'll use some print commands today just because that helps demonstrate. It'll actually print out the outcome down here in the terminal. So if we do print, and then we do 2 plus 2, we should get 4 down there. There we go. You can do 2 minus 2. There you go. You can do 2, let's do another number here so it looks a little different. 2 times 8. There we go. And we can do 8 divided by 2. So some basic math there, all good. Any whole number is going to represent what you call an integer. Once you start dealing with decimal points, that's where you get into what they call floats. So let's do something that should create a pretty long decimal here. Print, I don't know, 772 divided by 37. I'm assuming that doesn't go in equally. There we go. So we've got a long float here, or a number with a long remainder. So what we can do, guys, is usually you're not going to want your program to display something like that, especially if you're doing like, this could be money that you're representing on the screen. It could be anything, but usually you don't want like 15 decimal places or whatever. So we're going to use a round function to clean up our floats. So if we do round, and then you put in either the number or the math to create the number, and then a comma, and then the amount of decimal places. And then we have to close up our print command, and then we'll run that again, and now you see we have 2086, so $20.86. So that is some very basic stuff about integers or whole numbers and then floats. There's more to it, but this is like super high level introduction stuff here. The next thing you have is a string. Excuse me. A string is, a string of letters or words that makes up a string. So A is a string, and this whole thing is a string, So those are both examples of strings. We can create variables for these strings. We'll cover variables in another video, but just as an example, we'll just say A equals that string, and then we'll say B equals that string. And then we can do print A, and we get the letter A. Now if we do print B, it prints out that string, right? The whole string there, the value of B. Now you could also concatenate strings, so you can do print A plus B. There you go. Now it concatenated right on there. It's not going to put any space in there for you. So if you wanted to add that, you'd have to add it in there. But that is a basic introduction to strings. And again, these are going to be very common in programs as well. Obviously, you're going to have text on your application, things like that. So strings, string manipulation is a big one. If you have data that you need to modify, maybe it's coming in out of a document and there's a need to manipulate that in multiple different ways or split different types of files at delimiters and things like that. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with string manipulation in Python. All right, guys, next one we'll look at is Boolean. This is just basically a true false evaluator. Sounds really simple, but it's super powerful when you're building an application. This can come in really handy. So I'll show you a quick example. A equals 1, B equals 2. Now we're just going to write a simple little statement here, if statement. So if A is greater than B. Now this is only going to be true or false, right? So if it's true or if it's false. So if it's true, meaning A is greater than B, print A is greater. And then we can make an else statement here and say print B is greater. All right, so if we run this, it should say B is greater because this is a false statement. There you go, B is greater. And if we flip that around, or we just make this 3, that way A is greater, we should get A is greater. So a very simple way to use the Boolean or true-false logic to check for different conditions. And these can be stacked. You can have multiple conditions, so you can evaluate, as many things as you want. So maybe, are you on the freeway? Are you out of gas? And then if both of those are true, then you're having a bad day, right? So that's kind of a dumb example, but you could stack these and have multiple things evaluated, multiple conditions evaluated. So Boolean is definitely going to be using that one in our code when we start building an app. All right, guys, that was a quick video. I'm sorry, the last one on here is we won't do a demonstration, but it's just a special data type called none, and it represents a absent or null value in Python. So we'll probably see that as we start to code as well. All right, guys, thanks for watching this video. We covered some very basic data types, covered integer, which is a whole number. We looked at float, which is your decimal point numbers, and we looked at a way to round those floats to a specific amount of decimal places. We looked at strings, which are basically letters and words, and then we looked at a quick example of how we can manipulate strings. Well, today we basically just looked at concatenating or combining strings. A lot more that we can do with that as well that we'll get into. Then we looked at Boolean. Boolean, again, being the true-false evaluator. Very handy, very powerful. So just wanted to give you an introduction to these different data types before we jump into actually starting to build a program. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you look forward to the next one. I know I do. Have a great day and take care.